This is your daily news brief with Karan Rao and Aisha Mehta.
Welcome to today's deep dive.
So if you look at a nation's foreign policy from a distance, it often looks like a beautifully choreographed ballet.
Right, I mean, you have multi-billion-dollar trade deals, diplomatic handshakes, grand infrastructure projects spanning continents.
Exactly. It all looks incredibly deliberate, as if every country is moving in perfect synchronization.
It's the ultimate macro view, you know. From 30,000 feet, everything seems perfectly under control.
But then you zoom all the way in, past the treaties, past the global summits, and you look at what is actually happening on the ground.
In the lives of everyday citizens.
Yeah. And on the exact same day, suddenly, that elegant ballet looks a lot more like a chaotic street fight.
It really does.
Today, we are unpacking a diverse stack of breaking reports from July 16th, 2026, and the contrast between the macro and the micro here is absolutely mind-blowing.
It's a profound whiplash.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you have India successfully navigating massive global energy crises and inking these historic free trade agreements.
Right. And on the other hand, domestic authorities are filing criminal charges against citizens simply because they complained about their broken scooters on Instagram.
Which is just wild. The systems that govern us, trade, energy, law, tech, they're scaling up to this massive, unfeeling global level. But the people living inside those systems are feeling the friction in very intimate, everyday ways. Yeah, and how those two realities collide is basically the defining story of this moment.
So let's start with the big picture, the global energy and trade chessboard. The Indo-UK Free Trade Agreement just took effect.
And if we're looking purely at the macroeconomy, this is a staggering win.
I mean, we are talking about eliminating tariffs on almost all Indian exports to Britain.
Right, and reducing or completely ending duties on 92% of British imports into India.
The speed of this is what really stands out to me, though.
Yeah, the British High Commissioner, Lindy Cameron, she actually noted this is the UK's fastest implementation of trade deal after signing. And the immediate numbers definitely reflect that velocity. On day one alone, India reported exporting $140 million worth of goods to the UK.
Just on day one.
Just day one. Electronics, pharmaceuticals, gems. And in return, Britain sent a symbolic shipment to Mumbai featuring a very necessary bottle of scotch.
Which makes perfect sense considering Indian tariffs on British Scotch whiskey were just slashed in half.
Yeah, dropping immediately to 75% with this built-in glide path down to 40% over the next decade.
And if you're in the market for a premium UK-made car, the duties on those are dropping from a punishing 110% down to just 10% through a quota system.
But, you know, the actual mechanics of how this deal got done are fascinating because for a long time, this was completely stalled.
Right. The steel issue.
Exactly. The UK wanted to sharply reduce tariff-free steel import quotas and double the duties on shipments that exceeded those limits.
Which would have absolutely hammered Indian steel exporters.
It was a massive roadblock. The UK framed its steel measures as a matter of national security to protect their domestic industry.
So rather than letting the entire trade deal collapse over one sector, they utilized some really pragmatic bureaucracy.
Yeah, India audited its exporters and essentially announced that 85% of them wouldn't even trigger the UK's specific limits.
So they didn't fight the wall, they just walked around it.
Precisely. They used something called the Authorized Use Scheme.
Okay, let me break down how this mechanism works for anyone who doesn't speak trade law. Instead of demanding an open floodgate for all Indian steel, which obviously scares the UK, India basically said, well, we will only send this specific batch of steel for specific pre-approved manufacturing jobs in the UK.
Right. It's like a VIP pass for highly regulated shipments.
Exactly, rather than a general admission ticket to just dump steel on the open market.
They compartmentalized the problem. A British official actually explicitly stated that their steel measures are completely separate from this free trade agreement.
They agreed to disagree on the broader principle so the immediate deal could pass.
And you see this exact same strategy with climate policy. The UK is preparing to launch a carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is often referred to as CBAM.
Think of CBAM as a toll booth for pollution. If a country with weak environmental laws tries to sell cheap goods to the UK slaps a carbon tax on those goods at the border.
Right, to level the playing field for their own greener industries.
And India naturally wanted an exemption from this upcoming carbon tax.
But the UK refused. But again, instead of walking away, Both sides just agreed that CBAM is a separate issue for another day.
It is a masterclass in not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And if we look at the United States right now, you see that exact same pragmatism insulating their relationship with India.
Yeah, this part blew my mind. There is currently a proposed U.S. bill seeking to impose a 100% tariff on any country that purchases Russian oil.
And India buys a massive amount of Russian oil.
Exactly. You would assume a bill like that would immediately torpedo the ongoing India-U.S. trade negotiations.
But according to senior Indian government officials, it is not even a sticking point.
Not at all. Both nations are just highly motivated to finalize the trade framework they announced back in February.
They have effectively placed their bilateral trade talks in a geopolitical soundproof booth.
Yeah, completely isolating them from the heat surrounding Russian oil.
And speaking of geopolitical heat, let's talk about why securing independent energy is so desperately crucial right now. We have to look at the Middle East. As of today, the U.S. has launched its 5th consecutive day of airstrikes against Iran.
U.S. Central Command has been targeting coastal defense systems and cruise missile storage near the Strait of Hormuz.
This is a severe escalation triggered by Tehran's decision over the weekend to completely close the strait.
And for those who might not follow maritime geography, the Strait of Hormuz is essentially the jugular vein of the global economy.
Yeah, it's a very narrow waterway between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Roughly a fifth of the entire world's global oil and gas shipments pass through that specific choke point.
So when it closes, the global engine starts to sputter.
Shipping traffic has predictably plummeted. Brent crude oil spiked to a one-month high of $84.95 a barrel.
And Donald Trump is applying immense pressure, warning that Iranian energy infrastructure could be targeted next if they don't return to negotiations.
In response, Iran's parliament speaker is calling this an essential and existential war.
The Middle East is literally catching fire, and oil volatility is going through the roof.
It feels like India is balancing on a geopolitical unicycle while juggling flaming torches, you know?
It's a good way to put it.
They are locking in UK trade, keeping the US happy despite Russian oil ties, and trying to secure their own power grid.
Which leads directly to the 3rd India-Australia annual summit that just wrapped up in Melbourne.
Right. And the crown jewel of that summit was Australia agreeing to supply uranium to India's nuclear power program. So is this Australian uranium deal basically India's ultimate insurance policy to guarantee our future power grid amidst all this chaos?
It is absolutely the cornerstone of their long-term survival strategy.
Yeah.
Historically, Australia held a very strict line. They refused to export uranium to any country that hadn't signed the Global Non-Proliferation Treaty.
But India spent years proving its non-proliferation credentials.
Yeah, the breakthrough was India signing additional protocol with the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Which is essentially India handing international inspectors a master key.
Exactly. It grants the IAEA expanded rights to visit nuclear facilities, take environmental samples, and verify that the nuclear material is strictly for civilian power.
Not weapons.
Right, not weapons. And once India opened its doors and proved its intent, Australia, which holds about a third of the world's highest quality uranium reserves, they agreed to become a supplier.
Because this fuel is the biological requirement for India's incredibly ambitious energy goal.
Yeah, they are aiming to scale their nuclear power capacity from 8.78 gigawatts today to a staggering 100 gigawatts by 2047.
I mean, 100 gigawatts is a monumental leap. How does a country even execute an infrastructure scale-up of that magnitude?
Well, it requires a dual strategy. First, they are building a fleet of large 700-megawatt indigenous reactors.
Okay.
And second, they're developing small modular reactors, or SMRs.
Right, SMRs.
Yeah, SMRs are smaller, factory-built reactors designed for industrial use, powering steel plants, cement factories, and the massive AI data centers that require constant, low-carbon baseload power.
But the true mechanism unlocking this growth is the new Shanti Act.
The Shanti Act is a total domestic game-changer. For decades, atomic energy in India was a strict state monopoly.
But this new legislation finally allows private sector companies to partner with the government.
Exactly, bringing in the massive private capital needed to actually build these reactors. There's a massive modernization of their grid.
Okay, I have to push back here, though. We just talked about rapidly expanding our nuclear footprint to 100 gigawatts, bringing in private contractors, powering up AI data centers.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at this report from the Kudankulam nuclear power plant in Tamil Nadu. a ransomware group just exposed 19,000 sensitive blueprints from this plant.
Right, the World Leaks breach.
Yeah, so aren't we building a high-tech fortress but leaving the digital back door wide open?
Well, that is the multi-billion-dollar vulnerability of modern infrastructure. This ransomware group called World Leaks posted nearly 19,000 files on the dark web.
And this wasn't just basic data.
No, these were plant infrastructure blueprints, meeting records, inspection documents, and even a file appearing to show a $112 million insurance policy for terrorism-related damage.
But the crucial detail is how the hackers got in. They didn't hack the nuclear plant's servers directly.
No, they hacked a third-party contractor, Reliance Group, which is building units 3 and 4 at the plant.
It's like building an impenetrable titanium vault, but leaving the blueprints in the caterer's unlatched pickup truck.
That is exactly what it's like, and it goes even deeper. The breach wasn't even on Reliance's in-house server.
Right.
It occurred on a server hosted by an Indian data center provider called Yotta.
And Yotta actually detected the suspicious activity and stopped the ransomware from locking down the systems, right?
They did, but the hackers had already exfiltrated the data before the lockdown.
Wow.
Yeah. Nicholas Roth, a senior director at the Nuclear Threat Initiative, issued a really stark warning about the mechanics of these breaches. Adversaries don't need to attack a facility physically anymore.
They use these third-party breaches to map support systems.
Right, identify specific equipment suppliers and pinpoint the weakest link in the supply chain.
Because when systems get this large, your security is entirely dependent on the cybersecurity budget of your smallest vendor.
Exactly. And we are seeing the physical equivalent of this asymmetric threat playing out right next door in Balochistan.
Regarding China's massive $65 billion investment in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC.
Yeah. Balochistan is Pakistan's largest province. It's incredibly rich in natural resources and geostrategically vital because it sits directly on the Arabian Sea.
And for China, this region is the centerpiece of their global Belt and Road Initiative. The Gwadar port in Balochistan is designed to give China a direct overland shipping route to the Arabian Sea,
which solves a major geographic headache for Beijing. Without Gwadar, China's energy imports have to sail all the way through the Malacca Strait near Singapore.
A very narrow waterway that the U.S. Navy could easily blockade in a conflict.
Right. CPEC is basically China's bypass surgery for their supply chain.
But that bypass is highly vulnerable to the local population. There's a viral letter currently circulating claiming that Balak separatists have declared independence and control large parts of the province.
Now, we must clarify that these claims are not independently verified, and full independence is highly unlikely.
Right, we want to be clear about that, but the mechanism of instability is very real.
Oh, absolutely. Separatist groups like the Balochistan Liberation Army have repeatedly attacked Chinese nationals and CPEC-linked projects.
Because they argue that Islamabad and Beijing are strip mining local resources without providing any economic benefit to the people actually living there.
It is the ultimate lesson in systemic vulnerability. China can pour $65 billion into state-of-the-art highways and deep-water ports. But if a local insurgency uses cheap, asymmetric tactics to blow up a convoy,
the entire economic corridor is paralyzed.
Exactly. We constantly see insurgent groups pushing back against state infrastructure abroad. But domestically, within India's borders, we're witnessing a fascinating evolution of citizens pushing back against political and legal systems.
And the state's varied responses to them. Let's analyze the ethanol fuel FIRs.
Right, this is a perfect example.
Nagpur police recently booked several content creators for criticizing the government's ethanol-blended fuel policy, specifically the E20 and E30 blends.
The complaint was filed by an official from the BJP's Nagpur city social media cell, alleging that the influencers defamed Union Minister Nitin Gadkari.
And within 2 days, 3 of the Instagram accounts named in the police report simply vanished from the platform.
But the contrast in how these creators responded illustrates the new friction of digital speech. You have Rohit Kumar, whose scooter broke down, allegedly due to the blended fuel.
Right. And after the FIR, he uploaded a video apologizing for using abusive language against the minister.
But he stood firmly by his consumer complaint. He even referenced a video where a petrol pump staffer admitted a fuel nozzle was faulty.
His defense essentially boiled down to, I support the government, but my primary mode of transport was ruined. Is a middle-class consumer not allowed to complain?
And then you have Manish Kashyap from Bihar, who utilized a completely different mechanism of pushback.
Yeah, he released a video directly addressing Gadkari, refusing to retract a single word.
He essentially dared the government to publicly prove his claims false and stated he was willing to go to jail over a consumer grievance.
So, looking at these influencer FIRs, where exactly is the line drawn today? When does a consumer's right to vent about a faulty product transform into criminal defamation of a government policy?
While that boundary is entirely blurred right now,
Yeah.
the state clearly views these viral complaints not just as consumer feedback, but as coordinated digital attacks on public infrastructure policy.
It is a striking contrast when you compare this digital drama to our next story.
Yeah.
Because the ethanol influencers and Sona Wangchuk feel like two completely different eras of protest colliding.
They really do.
One is a viral digital outcry over a scooter that instantly gets a police FIR, and the other is an ancient, grueling physical fast that government authorities are seemingly ignoring.
Sona Wangchuk is currently on day 18 of an indefinite hunger strike, demanding the resignation of the education minister over alleged irregularities and paper leaks in the NEET medical entrance exams.
The biological mechanics of his protest are severe. He has lost nearly 9 kilograms, dropping to just 57.15 kilos.
His blood sugar is hovering at 80.
And he is utilizing the absolute strictest form of this protest. He is consuming nothing but salt water to prevent total organ failure. There are no intravenous drips providing hidden nutrients.
This is actually his third prolonged hunger strike this year. Doctors have stated he requires near round-the-clock medical supervision.
Yet he is using video updates to manage his supporters, explicitly telling them his condition isn't immediately life-threatening to prevent panic.
Right, and urging them to focus their energy on a march to Parliament rather than asking him to break his fast.
There is one detail about this that I just cannot stop thinking about, though.
What's that?
Despite starving himself for 18 days in the sweltering heat, his only actual complaint to his support team was about the noise pollution at Jantar Mantar.
Oh, right.
After living in the quiet altitude of Ladakh, the city noise was literally driving him crazy, so his team had to source a pair of high-end noise-canceling earphones for him.
It is such a surreal, modern, technological requirement embedded in this deeply traditional, visceral form of protest.
It highlights the human element inside these massive structural fights.
And speaking of structural fights, we are seeing the political apparatus in Bengal dealing with severe internal friction right now.
Yeah, Madan Mitra, a veteran Trinamool Congress leader and Kamarhati MLA, has resigned from all his TMC posts, including his role as chief whip in the assembly.
He is throwing his weight behind a rebel camp led by Ritabrata Banerjee. And Mitra's exit was not subtle.
No, he publicly attacked Abhishek Banerjee, calling him more dangerous than the ED, the Enforcement Directorate.
Mitra is alleging that the entire party apparatus is sinking because it has become singularly focused on protecting one individual.
Now, to maintain absolute neutrality here, we're simply analyzing the structural shift in the political landscape, not endorsing these claims.
Right, but Mitra has historically been considered one of Mamata Banerjee's closest and most loyal associates.
So his defection provides significant momentum to a rebel faction that is now actively claiming control of party headquarters and attempting to establish a parallel organizational structure.
It is a very clear example of a political system tearing itself apart from the inside.
But sometimes a system recognizes its own internal failures and takes drastic action to correct itself.
Which is exactly what happened this week, with the Supreme Court issuing an incredibly sharp rebuke of the Patna High Court.
This was a suo motu case. In legal terms, suo motu means the Supreme Court didn't wait for a formal appeal to be filed by a victim.
Right. The injustice was so glaring that the court effectively became its own plaintiff and took up the case independently after senior advocate Shobha Gupta brought a disturbing lower court ruling to their attention.
The Patna High Court had overturned a conviction in a 2008 case of attempt to rape.
And the mechanical reasoning the lower court used to overturn that conviction was horrifying.
It really was. They ruled that attempting to remove a survivor's clothing, specifically her salwar, and pressing her chest did not technically amount to an attempt to rape.
The lower court even extrapolated that grabbing a minor, breaking her clothing string, and dragging her would also not meet the specific legal threshold for that offense.
The Supreme Court bench was visibly aghast. Chief Justice Surya Kant explicitly condemned the lack of basic legal research behind such decisions.
He bluntly stated on the record that this staff is doing nothing.
It is a powerful instance of the highest court defending a citizen's fundamental right to bodily autonomy against a lower court's regressively narrow interpretation of the law.
But the Supreme Court didn't just issue a verbal reprimand here. They utilized their supervisory power to alter the mechanics of the entire judicial system.
They approved a National Expert Committee report containing strict guidelines on judicial sensitivity in sexual offense cases.
Crucially, they mandated that all courts and police stations nationwide must follow this specific handbook when registering FIRs and filing charge sheets.
They are essentially forcing empathy and standardized legal logic into the lower tiers of the justice system.
It's a massive systemic correction.
Okay, we have navigated heavy geopolitical tensions, cyber warfare, intense domestic disputes, and deep legal battles. Let's pivot to an arena where structural conflict is actually highly regulated and meant to be fun.
International sports.
Specifically, international cricket. The ICC just announced a sweeping structural overhaul of the formats for the men's ODI and T20 World Cups.
Yeah, and the changes are pretty significant.
Break down the mechanics of the ODI changes for me. How does the new tournament actually work?
Okay, so it expands to a 14-team structure. However, the bottom 3 ranked teams are filtered into a preliminary Super Series round, with only one team surviving to advance.
Okay.
This creates 2 groups of 6. The top 3 from each group plus the next best overall team move into a new 7-team round-robin stage, officially dubbed the Super 7.
And from that round-robin, the top 4 advance to the semifinals.
Exactly.
And what about the T20 format?
They're expanding the second stage to 10 teams. The tournament starts with 5 groups of 4. The top 2 from each group filter into a Super 10 stage, which is split into 2 groups of 5.
Okay, got it.
The top team from each Super 10 group gets a fast pass straight to the semis. But the second and third place teams must face off in what they are calling crossover eliminators to secure the final 2 semifinal spots. Oh, and Scotland gets a direct entry for 2028.
Okay, I have to look at the financial mechanics here. The ICC claims this Super 7 round robin and these crossover eliminators are about creating a better competitive narrative, right?
That's the official line.
But isn't this redesign just a mathematically guaranteed safety net to squeeze more broadcast matches out of the biggest teams?
I mean, it is a very valid critique of the business model. International cricket is funded by the broadcast revenue generated primarily by a few massive markets, chiefly India, England, and Australia.
Right, so if India gets knocked out in the first round of a straight knockout tournament, the TV networks lose hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising.
Yeah.
By utilizing a Super 7 round robin, you guarantee that the biggest teams play multiple high-stakes matches, even if they suffer an early upset.
It is structural engineering applied to sports entertainment to protect the bottom line.
Which brings us full circle to the core theme of today's deep dive.
It really does.
We started at the absolute macro scale. We watched India maneuver through pragmatic bureaucracy to secure a UK trade deal, isolate its trade talks from the US tariff threats over Russian oil, and lock down an Australian uranium pipeline to power a 100-gigawatt future amidst the chaos in the Strait of Hormuz.
And we looked at how those massive systems are inherently vulnerable. A single third-party server hosted by Yara can expose the blueprints of a nuclear fortress.
A local insurgency in Balochistan can threaten a $65 billion global trade corridor.
And then we examine the friction at the hyperlocal level. A digital influencer facing a police FIR over a scooter complaint.
An activist surviving on salt water to force educational reform.
And the Supreme Court stepping in to mandate judicial sensitivity after a catastrophic failure of logic in a lower court.
It is an overwhelming amount of information, but it all connects. We often think about these massive forces, international trade, energy grids, legal frameworks, as systems we have built to control the world. But as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a different perspective to mull over.
What is the new angle?
Consider the interconnectedness of vulnerability. As systems get larger, whether it's an ambitious 100-gigawatt nuclear fleet, massive multinational infrastructure like CPEC, or sprawling global trade deals, the individual points of failure become increasingly critical.
A single third-party server glitch, a single judge's interpretation in Patna, or a single protester's health can send shockwaves through the whole apparatus.
Exactly. So as our systems scale up to the global level, how do we ensure the small components, individual security rights, and voices don't get crushed in the gears? It's something to think about. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. We will see you next time.